Move, you worthless ghetto trash! Edward Caldwell's hand cracks across Beatrice Coleman's face. The elderly woman's coffee cup flies off the table, shattering on the floor. Every customer freezes. Phones emerge from pockets. Beatrice touches her burning cheek, but doesn't cry. Her steady eyes meet Caldwell's glare without fear. Something in her calm composure unsettles him. Caldwell straightens his expensive tie, satisfied. But Beatrice Coleman isn't nobody. The way other customers look at her with respect hints at something deeper. Caldwell has no idea what he's just set in motion, because Beatrice has a son, and when Marcus Coleman learns what happened to his mother today, Edward Caldwell's comfortable world will begin to crumble in ways he never imagined possible. Have you ever watched someone destroy their future with one moment of pure arrogance? Beatrice Coleman's morning routine never changed. 6:30 sharp. She rose from bed in her modest apartment, sunlight filtering through lace curtains she'd sewn herself 40 years ago. The space reflected a lifetime of careful choices. Family photos arranged precisely on the mantel, fresh flowers from her window garden, shelves lined with books that spoke of an educated mind. The photographs told deliberate stories. Beatrice in cap and gown clutching her PhD in education. Beatrice with Thomas, her late husband, dancing at their anniversary celebration, and most prominently displayed recent pictures of her son Marcus at formal dinners, charity galas, business conferences, always impeccably dressed, always commanding respect from everyone around him. Her neighbors knew Marcus was successful, very successful. Beatrice kept the details appropriately vague. Something in business, she'd say with maternal pride. Important meetings, significant responsibilities, the kind of work that required expensive suits and private cars. At precisely 8 tossers, her phone rang. "Morning, Ma. Sleep well?" Marcus's voice carried the warmth reserved only for family. Beatrice smiled, settling into her favorite chair. "Like a baby, sweetheart. How's work treating you?" "Can't complain. Business is business. Do you have plans today?" "Lunch with Esther at Gracie's, our usual Tuesday tradition." A pause. Marcus always worried about her venturing out alone, though Beatrice never understood why. The neighborhood was perfectly safe, filled with people who'd known her for decades. "Ma, you know I could arrange something nicer. Private dining rooms, proper service staff, places more suited to someone of your standing." Beatrice chuckled. "Marcus Coleman, I raised you better than that. Good people matter more than fancy places. Gracie's has both good food and good hearts." "Yes, ma'am. Just be careful out there, okay? People aren't always what they seem." "I'll be fine, baby. You worry too much about your old mother. It's my job to worry. Love you, Ma." The call ended abruptly. Marcus never lingered on phones, even with family. Successful men operated on tight schedules, Beatrice understood. Important decisions waiting, crucial meetings demanding attention. Across the city, Edward Caldwell's morning unfolded in stark contrast. His penthouse office occupied the entire 42nd floor of downtown's most prestigious tower. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered commanding views of the financial district sprawling below. Italian marble floors reflected light from crystal chandeliers. Leather furniture cost more than most families earned annually. Caldwell stood at those windows like a general surveying conquered territory. His reflections stared back, perfectly styled hair, hand-tailored suit, gold Rolex catching morning light. Every detail calculated to project superiority, dominance, untouchable success. His assistant, Rebecca, approached hesitantly, knowing Caldwell's moods could shift violently without warning. "Sir, your 10 appointment files are ready. Mrs. Liu also called, requesting to reschedule her consultation." Caldwell's expression darkened immediately. "Mrs. Liu, That woman with the thick accent who can barely string together coherent English sentences. Tell people like her to master basic communication before wasting my valuable time. Sir, she actually speaks 5 languages fluently and runs 3 successful tech companies. Her portfolio is quite impressive. I don't care if she runs 50 companies. Image matters in this profession. Rebecca, my reputation depends on maintaining appropriate clientele. The kind of people who belong in establishments like this, who understand quality and class. This was Caldwell's carefully constructed universe. Success measured by how many people you could dismiss as inferior. Power defined by never considering anyone else's struggles, dreams, or basic humanity. He'd built his career defending wealthy corporations against discrimination lawsuits, ensuring the powerful remained untouchable while the vulnerable stayed crushed. His phone displayed news notifications, police brutality videos going viral, investigative reports exposing systemic racism in hiring practices, congressional hearings on hate crimes. Caldwell scrolled past each story with practiced indifference. These problems belonged to other people, people whose existence he considered completely irrelevant to his continued prosperity. Meanwhile, Gracie's diner buzzed with preparation for another busy lunch service. Sophia Martinez had inherited the establishment from her father, continuing 3 decades of serving the neighborhood with genuine warmth. Construction workers grabbed quick breakfast before job sites. Office employees escaped sterile corporate cafeterias for real conversation and homemade food. Elderly regulars who'd been coming since the doors first opened. Beatrice Coleman reigned as unofficial neighborhood royalty. Every Tuesday at noon, she'd arrive with Esther Hayes from their church. Same corner booth, same gentle orders, same conversations that somehow made everyone nearby feel more peaceful. Sophia always prepared, specially. Table 6 was cleaned twice. Good china, fresh napkins, small flower arrangements. The respect wasn't calculated business strategy. It was earned through years of Beatrice's quiet kindness, her mysterious ability to solve impossible problems for struggling families. When Sophia's father suffered his stroke, Beatrice organized meal deliveries and hospital visits. When the diner faced eviction from corporate developers, Beatrice somehow produced a lawyer who handled everything pro bono, asking no payment except the satisfaction of helping good people. Nobody questioned how Beatrice made these connections materialize. Her son Marcus must have developed quite an impressive network through his business success. In the corner booth, a well-dressed man sat reading financial newspapers, coffee growing cold while he quietly observed every person entering or leaving. Some professional habits never fade, regardless of official retirement from dangerous work. The collision began with something as simple as a bumped elbow. Beatrice had just settled into her favorite booth when Edward Caldwell stormed through Gracie's front door like a man at war with the universe. His Armani suit wrinkled from the morning's frustrations. A parking ticket from some overzealous meter maid, construction delays that made him 20 minutes late. A coffee shop barista who'd clearly never learned proper customer service. Caldwell surveyed the diner with barely concealed disgust. Cracked vinyl booths, laminated menus, the smell of grease and honest work hanging in the air. This wasn't his usual restaurant, but his preferred establishment had been booked solid. He'd have to endure slumming it with the common people. Sophia Martinez approached with professional courtesy, despite sensing trouble brewing. "Good afternoon, sir. Table for one?" "Obviously," Caldwell snapped, not bothering to look at her. "Somewhere clean, if such a thing exists in this place, and I need it fast. I have important meetings this afternoon." Sophia bit back her response, leading him to a table near Beatrice's booth. Caldwell threw himself into the seat immediately, pulling out his phone to make his displeasure known to the world through a series of aggressive text messages. Beatrice sat peacefully with Esther, their conversation flowing like a gentle stream. Esther was describing her grandson's college acceptance when Beatrice reached for the sugar dispenser. Her elbow, moving with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to be mindful in small spaces, barely grazed Caldwell's briefcase sitting on the adjacent table. The contact was feather-light, barely noticeable, but it was enough to knock over Caldwell's oversized coffee cup. Brown liquid cascaded across his briefcase, seeping into the expensive leather and pooling around scattered legal documents. Caldwell watched in horror as coffee soaked through contracts, depositions, case files that represented weeks of billable hours. "What the hell?" Caldwell exploded, leaping to his feet. The entire diner fell silent. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Every eye turned toward the unfolding drama. Beatrice immediately began reaching for napkins. "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Let me help you clean that up." But Caldwell was beyond reason. The morning's accumulated frustrations, his sense of superiority, his fundamental belief that people like Beatrice existed solely to inconvenience people like him. Everything converged into pure, undiluted rage. "You clumsy old bat, look what you've done." Beatrice's hand froze, napkins clutched in her weathered fingers. Esther gasped. Sophia started moving towards the table, but Caldwell's voice cut through the air like a blade. "These documents are worth more than you'll see in your entire pathetic life. Do you have any idea what you've cost me?" Beatrice straightened slowly, her dignity intact despite the public humiliation. "Sir, it was clearly an accident. I'm happy to pay for any cleaning costs." "Cleaning costs?" Caldwell's voice rose to a near shriek. "These are irreplaceable legal documents, contracts with Fortune 500 companies, cases that determine whether real Americans keep their jobs or lose them to your kind." The racial undercurrent was unmistakable. Several customers began pulling out phones, sensing something newsworthy developing. Beatrice's voice remained steady. "I understand you're upset, but there's no need for that kind of language. Don't tell me what kind of language to use." Caldwell stepped closer, towering over Beatrice's seated frame. "You people need to learn your place. This is what happens when you let just anyone into decent establishments." Esther Hayes, 78 years old and a retired school principal, found her voice. "Young man, you're being completely unreasonable. Accidents happen." Caldwell whirled on her. "And you can shut your mouth, too. I don't need lectures from welfare queens about reasonable behavior." That's when phones started emerging from pockets throughout the diner. The racial slurs were unmistakable now, impossible to misinterpret or excuse. Sophia Martinez had heard enough. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice or leave my establishment." Caldwell turned his fury on Sophia. "Your establishment? This grease pit. You should be thanking me for even setting foot in here. People like me are the only reason places like this stay in business." Beatrice slowly stood, her movements deliberate and controlled. At 5'4", she still had to look up at Caldwell's 6F'd frame, but something in her posture commanded attention. "Sir, I've apologized sincerely for an honest mistake. I've offered to make restitution for any damages, but I will not sit here and allow you to speak to me, my friend, or this lovely business owner with such disrespect." Caldwell's face contorted with rage. The idea that this nobody, this insignificant old black woman would dare stand up to him, would dare lecture him about respect. It was beyond his comprehension. "You'll sit down and shut up, or I'll make sure you regret ever leaving whatever government housing project spawned you." Beatrice's voice remained steady as granite. "I have every right to be in this restaurant. I've been a customer here longer than you've probably known this neighborhood existed. I'm a taxpayer, a community member, and a human being deserving of basic courtesy." "Human beings?" Caldwell's laugh was ugly, sharp-edged. "You're nothing but a drain on society. You and your whole worthless kind." The words hung in the air like poison. Phone cameras captured every syllable. In the corner booth, the well-dressed man had stopped pretending to read his newspaper. Beatrice straightened to her full height, radiating a dignity that made Caldwell's expensive clothes look like costume jewelry. "Young man, you clearly don't know who you're speaking to." "I know exactly who you are," Caldwell snarled. "You're nobody. A nobody from nowhere with nothing who matters to absolutely no one." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Caldwell's hand moved. He grabbed Beatrice's wrist, his fingers digging into her thin skin with enough force to leave marks. "You're going to sit down, shut up, and figure out how you're going to pay for what you've destroyed." Beatrice looked down at his hand, gripping her wrist, then back up at his face. "Sir, you need to let go of me now." "I'll let go when you show proper respect to your betters." Esther Hayes was on her feet now. "Let go of her this instant." Sophia Martinez moved closer, cell phone in hand. "Sir, if you don't release her immediately, I'm calling the police." But Caldwell was beyond all reason, beyond any consideration of consequences. The caffeine, the stress, the fundamental rage that came from a lifetime of believing the world owed him deference. It all crystallized into this moment when Beatrice tried to pull her wrist free. When she looked at him with those calm, unafraid eyes that suggested she'd faced down bigger monsters than Edward Caldwell, something inside him snapped completely. His free hand came up fast. The slap echoed through the diner like a gunshot. Beatrice's head snapped to the side. Coffee-stained napkins scattered to the floor. Her wedding ring, Thomas's ring, worn for 52 years, flew from her finger and rolled across the linoleum, coming to rest against a pair of expensive Italian leather shoes in the corner booth. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then chaos erupted. Customers leaped to their feet, phones held high, recording everything. Sophia Martinez was already dialing 911. Esther Hayes rushed to Beatrice's side, tears streaming down her face. But Beatrice Coleman didn't cry. She touched her cheek where Caldwell's palm had connected and felt the heat blooming across her dark skin. She looked at Edward Caldwell with something that wasn't fear, wasn't anger, wasn't even surprise. It was pity. "You have no idea what you just did," she said quietly. Caldwell straightened his tie, his breathing heavy, but his satisfaction evident. Another nobody put in their place, another lesson taught about the natural order of things. He had no idea that in the corner booth, Marcus Coleman's most trusted lieutenant was already speed dialing a number that would change everything. The man in the expensive shoes picked up Beatrice's ring, pocketing it carefully. Evidence, perhaps, or maybe just something to return to the woman his boss loved more than life itself. By the time the first police sirens became audible in the distance, Edward Caldwell had exactly 18 hours left of believing he was untouchable. Sergeant Paul Mendez arrived at Gracie's diner expecting another routine disturbance call. Instead, he found a dozen phones still recording and an atmosphere thick with tension. Caldwell immediately seized control. "Officer, thank God you're here. I was attacked by these people while enjoying a peaceful lunch." He flashed his law credentials with practiced ease. "Edward Caldwell, senior partner at Stratton, Caldwell and Associates. That woman deliberately destroyed my property and became violent when I requested compensation." Mendez surveyed the scene. Every witness wore the same expression. Disgust aimed squarely at Caldwell. Not typical when someone claims victimhood. "Sir, step back and let me assess the situation." Caldwell name-dropped shamelessly. "Detective Captain Anderson is a personal friend. Commissioner O'Malley attends my country club. I trust this will be handled appropriately." Beatrice provided her statement with quiet dignity despite her swollen cheek. When asked for emergency contacts, she handed over an elegant business card. "My son Marcus should be notified. Marcus Coleman, private consultant. Mendez noted the expensive cardstock, the mysterious job title. What kind of consulting, ma'am? Beatrice's smile was enigmatic. Business consulting. He helps people solve problems. Within an hour, grainy cell phone footage hit social media. The hashtag #NoChargerJusticeForBeatrice began trending. Users quickly identified Caldwell, posting his law firm's website and recent court victories defending corporations against discrimination lawsuits. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Caldwell's law office erupted into crisis mode. Partners convened emergency meetings as clients called with concerns, but Caldwell remained confident. This will blow over. Some people got slapped for being disrespectful. People understand actions have consequences. Meanwhile, Beatrice made a quiet phone call. Marcus, honey, I had a little trouble at lunch today. The voice changed instantly. Busy businessman replaced by something much more focused. What kind of trouble, Ma? Are you hurt? A misunderstanding with another customer. He got upset about spilled coffee and, well, he struck me. 3 seconds of deadly silence. He hit you? Just a bruised cheek. Police are here. There were witnesses. Thought you should know. What's his name? Edward Caldwell. Some kind of lawyer. Another silence. Longer this time. Ma, listen carefully. Don't speak to reporters without me present. Don't sign anything. I'm handling this now. Marcus, you don't need to get involved. Ma, absolute finality. Someone put their hands on you. This is business now. Caldwell was cited for assault, but released. Standard procedure for first-time offenders. He posted on social media that evening, framing himself as the victim of a shakedown attempt and complaining about politically correct overreach. His followers rallied to his defense, sharing their own stories and praising Caldwell for standing up to race hustlers. The echo chamber reinforced his confidence. A few weeks of minor controversy, maybe some sensitivity training, and everything would return to normal. Caldwell had spent his career understanding power dynamics, knowing which people mattered and which could be safely ignored. He'd calculated that Beatrice Coleman fell into the latter category. It was the most expensive miscalculation of his life. While Caldwell slept peacefully, certain phone calls were being made across the city. Quiet conversations between people who owed favors, who remembered debts, who understood that Marcus Coleman's family was not to be touched. The system was about to work very differently than Edward Caldwell expected. Marcus Coleman sat in the back room of the Gilded Lily, the most exclusive restaurant in the city's financial district. The weekly gathering looked like any other high-powered business dinner. Expensive suits, quiet conversations, the kind of meeting where fortunes were made and destroyed with handshakes. Except these weren't Fortune 500 executives. Marcus commanded the head of the table with quiet authority. To his right sat Johnny the Shark Moretti, who controlled the docks. To his left, Angela Ricci, who handled the family's legitimate businesses. Around the table, lieutenants, advisors, enforcers, all of them waiting for Marcus's word on territory disputes. Profit sharing and the 100 daily decisions that kept the Coleman crime family running smoothly. Marcus Coleman wasn't just successful, he was the boss. The man who controlled half the city's underground economy and maintained iron discipline over an organization that stretched from the waterfront to the suburbs. His phone buzzed during discussions about a construction contract. Marcus glanced at the screen. Ma. And immediately stood. Excuse me, he said quietly, and the room fell silent. When Marcus Coleman took a call from his mother, everything else stopped. He stepped into the adjoining office, closing the door behind him. Ma, what's wrong? Beatrice's voice carried through the speaker, measured and calm despite everything. I had a little trouble at lunch today. A man became upset about some spilled coffee and struck me. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. He hit you? Marcus's voice remained controlled, but everyone in the next room could hear the change in tone through the walls. His name is Edward Caldwell, some kind of lawyer. Marcus closed his eyes, processing the information with the methodical precision that had made him the most feared man in 3 states. Someone had put their hands on Beatrice Coleman. Someone was about to learn why that was the most dangerous mistake of their life. Ma, are you hurt? Do you need medical attention? Just a bruised cheek, sweetheart. Esther's with me, and the police were very professional. Marcus's mind was already working, calculating responses, measuring consequences. The old Marcus, the one who'd grown up on these streets, who'd earned his position through violence and intimidation, wanted immediate, brutal retribution. But Beatrice had raised him better than that. Ma, listen to me carefully. Don't speak to any reporters. Don't sign anything. And don't worry about this Caldwell character. I'll handle everything. Marcus, honey, you don't need to get involved in this mess. Ma. The word carried absolute finality. Someone put their hands on you. This stopped being a mess the moment he made that choice. Marcus ended the call and stood motionless for 30 seconds, staring at his reflection in the office window. The city sprawled below him. His city, where his word was law and his protection meant everything. He opened the door and returned to the dining room. 8 pairs of eyes watched him with the attention of soldiers awaiting orders from their general. Change of plans, Marcus announced. Johnny, I need everything you can find on a lawyer named Edward Caldwell. Full background. Finances, family, enemies, weaknesses. I want it in 2 hours. Johnny nodded, already reaching for his phone. What kind of lawyer, boss? The kind who thinks he can slap my mother and walk away. The reaction was immediate. Chairs scraped back, hands moved toward concealed weapons. Angela Ricci's face went pale. Boss, she said carefully, just say the word. Marcus held up a hand, and the room froze. This was why he commanded absolute loyalty, not just his capacity for violence, but his ability to control it. We do this right. Ma wants justice, not revenge. We use the system, but we make sure the system works properly. Across town, Edward Caldwell was enjoying a celebratory dinner at his country club, regaling fellow members with his version of the day's events. He'd turned the elderly woman into a grasping opportunist, himself into the victim of a shakedown attempt. His audience ate it up. These were his people, wealthy, white, convinced that the world's problems stemmed from others' inability to know their place. Caldwell had no idea that his name was currently being researched by some of the most thorough investigators money could buy, people who specialized in finding pressure points, who understood that everyone had secrets worth protecting. Within an hour, Marcus had a complete dossier. Caldwell's financial troubles hidden from his partners, but devastating nonetheless. His pattern of discrimination lawsuits always settled quietly out of court. His gambling debts to people who weren't patient about repayment. Most importantly, Caldwell owed money to Michael Big Mike Torino, who happened to be Marcus's cousin. The irony was almost poetic. Marcus made his first call to District Attorney Rachel Brooks. They'd known each other since childhood. She'd grown up 3 blocks from the Coleman house, had attended Beatrice's Sunday school classes for 5 years. Rachel, it's Marcus. We need to talk. Brooks's voice was immediately cautious. Marcus, I can't discuss ongoing cases with you. It's about my mother. A pause. Brooks knew exactly who Beatrice Coleman was, what she meant to the neighborhood, to Marcus. Is she all right? Someone assaulted her today, Edward Caldwell. I need to know if this case gets proper attention. Marcus, you know I can't promise special treatment. I'm not asking for special treatment, Rachel. I'm asking for justice, the kind my mother taught us both to believe in. Brooks was quiet for a long moment. She owed her law school scholarship to a recommendation letter Beatrice had written 15 years ago. Beatrice Coleman had believed in her when no one else would. "Send me the case file number. I'll review it personally." Marcus's second call went to Police Commissioner Thomas O'Malley, another old neighborhood connection, someone who remembered when Beatrice Coleman had organized community watches that kept their streets safe. The third call was to Judge Sofia Rodriguez, who'd received her first legal job through a referral Beatrice had arranged. One by one, Marcus contacted people who owed Beatrice Coleman debts of gratitude, not corruption, something deeper, something earned through decades of quiet kindness, of believing in people before they believed in themselves. By midnight, Edward Caldwell's assault case had been flagged for priority review. Not because of any illegal influence, but because Beatrice Coleman had spent 50 years building a community of people who remembered her faith in them. Marcus Coleman commanded fear throughout the criminal underworld. But Beatrice Coleman commanded something more powerful: respect throughout the legitimate world. Caldwell went to sleep confident that his connections would protect him. He had no idea that Beatrice's connections ran deeper, reached higher, and mattered more than his country club memberships and golf partnerships. The most dangerous man in the city was about to teach Edward Caldwell the difference between power and influence, between fear and respect, between what money could buy and what character earned. District Attorney Rachel Brooks arrived at her office at 6 a.m., 2 hours before her usual schedule. The Caldwell case file sat on her desk, flagged for immediate review. She'd known this moment would come eventually, the day when her professional obligations intersected with personal loyalty to Beatrice Coleman. Brooks opened the file with the methodical precision that had made her the youngest DA in the city's history. Body cam footage, witness statements, cell phone videos from multiple angles. The evidence was overwhelming, but that wasn't what concerned her. What concerned her was the phone call she'd received at midnight from Marcus Coleman. She'd grown up 3 blocks from the Coleman house, had attended Beatrice's Sunday school classes every week for 5 years. When Brooks's father lost his job at the factory, Beatrice had quietly arranged tutoring sessions, had written the recommendation letter that secured Brooks's full scholarship to law school. Beatrice Coleman had believed in her before she believed in herself. Now Marcus was calling in that debt not through threats or intimidation, but through something much more powerful: the simple request that justice be served properly. Brooks picked up her phone and dialed Assistant DA James Rodriguez. "James, I need you in my office immediately. Bring the Caldwell assault case." Rodriguez arrived within 20 minutes, coffee in hand and questions in his eyes. "Ma'am, this seems like a straightforward assault case. Why the priority review?" "Because Edward Caldwell has a pattern," Brooks said, spreading documents across her conference table. "I've been reviewing his history. 3 previous incidents, all settled out of court, all involving minority plaintiffs." She handed Rodriguez a thick folder. Employment discrimination lawsuits where Caldwell represented the corporate defendants, hostile workplace complaints that mysteriously disappeared, sexual harassment cases that never made it to trial. Rodriguez whistled low. "He's been using his position to silence victims, and now he's the perpetrator. James, I want you to build this case like it's the most important trial of your career, because if we don't stop Caldwell now, Beatrice Coleman won't be his last victim." Brooks didn't mention her personal connection to Beatrice. She didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. Across town, Police Commissioner Thomas O'Malley was having a similar conversation with Detective Captain Sarah Anderson. "Captain, I want you to personally oversee the Caldwell investigation. Full resources, complete transparency, everything by the book." Anderson frowned. "Sir, this is a misdemeanor assault. We don't usually assign detective captains to—" "Edward Caldwell assaulted a 72-year-old woman in front of witnesses," O'Malley interrupted. "This case is going to attract media attention, community scrutiny, and federal oversight if we handle it wrong. I want it handled right. O'Malley had his own reasons for personal investment. 20 years ago, when he was a rookie beat cop struggling with PTSD from his military service, Beatrice Coleman had organized community support that literally saved his career. She'd connected him with counseling services and had vouched for his character when Internal Affairs was considering disciplinary action. Beatrice Coleman had given him a second chance when no one else would. Anderson assembled a team of senior detectives and began re-examining every piece of evidence. The body cam footage revealed Caldwell's initial lies to responding officers. The witness statements painted a clear picture of escalating racial harassment. The cell phone videos captured every slur, every threat, every moment of humiliation he'd inflicted on Beatrice. But most damaging was Caldwell's own social media activity. His posts from that evening gloating about putting entitled minorities in their place, bragging about his connections protecting him from consequences. Caldwell had documented his own hate crime. Meanwhile, at Stratton, Caldwell, and Associates, the firm's senior partners were discovering the full scope of their exposure. Managing Partner. Harrison Stratton sat in an emergency session with the firm's other founding partners, reviewing Caldwell's case history with growing horror. "Gentlemen, we have a problem," Stratton announced. "Edwards' actions have created liability for the entire firm. Our malpractice insurance won't cover hate crimes. Our corporate clients are already asking questions." Partner Thomas Wakefield pulled up news coverage on his tablet. The video has 2 million views. The hashtag Dr. Justice for Beatrice is trending nationally. Our biggest client just canceled their retainer. We need to cut Caldwell loose immediately, declared partner Elizabeth Hayes. Issue a statement condemning his actions. Announce his suspension pending investigation. But they were already too late. Marcus Coleman's people had been busy throughout the night making phone calls, sharing information, ensuring that Caldwell's history became public knowledge. By morning, investigative journalists had Caldwell's complete disciplinary record from the State Bar Association. Employment lawyers were coming forward with stories of his harassment tactics. Former clients were describing his discriminatory behavior in depositions and court filings. Caldwell's carefully constructed reputation was collapsing in real time. At 10:04 a.m., Caldwell arrived at his office to find security guards waiting with boxes for his personal belongings. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. Stratton stood behind the guards, his expression grim. "Edward, the partners have voted unanimously to terminate your employment effective immediately. Your actions have brought disgrace to this firm and exposed us to lawsuits we can't afford." "You can't fire me. I'm a founding partner." "Read your partnership agreement, Edward. The morality clause is quite specific about behavior that damages the firm's reputation." Caldwell's face went white. Without the firm's protection, without their resources and connections, he was just another defendant facing serious criminal charges. "Harrison, we've been friends for 20 years. My clients generate millions in revenue. Your former clients, they've all requested new representation." Stratton handed him a letter. "You have 1 hour to clear out your office. Security will escort you from the building. Home." As Caldwell packed his personal items, his assistant, Rebecca, received dozens of calls from reporters, from civil rights organizations, from federal investigators who'd taken interest in his pattern of discrimination. Caldwell's phone buzzed with notifications. Clients terminating their contracts, colleagues distancing themselves, country club members expressing concern about his membership status. The social isolation was swift and complete, but Marcus Coleman wasn't finished. That afternoon, Caldwell received a visit from FBI agent Patricia Valdez, who'd been investigating civil rights violations in corporate America. "Mr. Caldwell, we'd like to discuss your representation of Megalith Corporation in their discrimination lawsuit, specifically your strategies for silencing minority plaintiffs." Caldwell's lawyer advised him to invoke his Fifth Amendment rights, but the damage was done. The federal investigation that Beatrice's assault had triggered was expanding into Caldwell's entire career. Judge Sofia Rodriguez, reviewing the case for preliminary hearing, noted Caldwell's history of using legal technicalities to escape accountability. This time, she would ensure every procedural requirement was met, every piece of evidence properly admitted. Caldwell had built his career on exploiting the system's weaknesses. Now that same system, guided by people who owed Beatrice Coleman their success, was closing every loophole he might have used. By evening, Caldwell sat alone in his penthouse apartment, watching news coverage of his downfall. The elderly black woman he'd dismissed as nobody had somehow triggered a coordinated response that destroyed everything he'd spent decades building. He still didn't understand how it had happened so quickly, so thoroughly. Caldwell had no idea that Beatrice Coleman had spent 50 years investing in people's futures, believing in their potential, helping them achieve success through education, opportunity, and simple human decency. Marcus Coleman commanded fear through violence and intimidation. But Beatrice Coleman commanded something infinitely more powerful: love, loyalty, and gratitude from hundreds of people whose lives she'd touched. Caldwell thought he'd slapped some random old woman. He'd actually struck the mother figure of half the city's power structure. Judges, prosecutors, police officials, community leaders who remembered Beatrice's faith in them when no one else cared. The investigation was proceeding with unprecedented speed and thoroughness, not because of corruption or outside pressure, but because people who owed Beatrice Coleman everything were finally able to repay their debts by ensuring justice was served properly. Caldwell's world was crumbling exactly the way Marcus Coleman had planned, through the system, with dignity, using the very principles of justice that Beatrice had spent her life teaching. The most dangerous man in the city was keeping his promise to his mother. Caldwell would face consequences through legal channels surrounded by people who remembered Beatrice's kindness and Marcus's patience. But patience had its limits, and Edward Caldwell was about to learn that some mistakes could never be undone, no matter how many connections you thought you had. And he was going to do it exactly the way his mother had taught him, through the system, with dignity, using the very principles of justice that Beatrice Coleman had spent her life upholding. Caldwell thought he'd slapped some nobody. He'd actually struck the mother of the most powerful man in the city, a man who'd learned that true strength came not from violence, but from knowing when and how to use every tool at your disposal. The countdown to Edward Caldwell's destruction had officially begun. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Media crews lined the hallway outside Judge Sofia Rodriguez's courtroom, their cameras capturing every person who entered. Civil rights leaders sat alongside neighborhood residents. Federal observers monitored from the back rows. The case of the people versus Edward Caldwell had become a symbol of something much larger than one moment of violence. Caldwell entered through a side door, flanked by his new attorney, a public defender named Michael Carter, who'd drawn the short straw when Caldwell's original legal team abandoned him. Gone was the expensive suit replaced by an ill-fitting jacket from a discount store. Gone was the arrogant swagger replaced by the hunched shoulders of a man who'd lost everything. In the gallery's front row sat Beatrice Coleman, her Sunday dress perfect, her posture radiating the quiet dignity that had sustained her through 72 years of life's challenges. Beside her, Esther Hayes held her hand in silent support. And in the back corner, almost invisible among the crowd, Marcus Coleman watched with the cold patience of a predator who'd cornered his prey. Caldwell's eyes found Marcus across the courtroom. For the first time since this nightmare began, he truly understood who Beatrice Coleman's son was. The expensive suit, the carefully groomed appearance, the way courthouse security nodded respectfully as he passed. This wasn't just some successful businessman. This was the man who owned half the city, who commanded fear and respect in equal measure, whose protection Beatrice had enjoyed without even knowing it existed. Judge Rodriguez called the court to order. The People v. Edward Caldwell, case number 2024, CR 4751, charges of assault in the third degree, aggravated harassment, and civil rights violations. Assistant DA James Rodriguez stood to present the prosecution's case. Over the past 3 weeks, he'd built an argument that went far beyond a single moment of violence. Your Honor, the defendant didn't just slap Beatrice Coleman. He perpetrated a hate crime against a pillar of our community, using racial slurs and physical violence to terrorize an elderly woman whose only offense was existing in a space he believed belonged exclusively to people like him. Rodriguez presented the evidence methodically. Body cam footage showing Caldwell's lies to police, cell phone videos capturing every racial slur, witness testimony describing the escalating harassment, Caldwell's own social media posts gloating about the incident. But the most damaging evidence came from Caldwell's own history. The defendant has a pattern of targeting minorities for harassment and discrimination. 3 previous incidents, multiple employment lawsuits where he silenced victims through intimidation and legal technicalities. This wasn't an isolated moment of anger. This was the culmination of a career built on systematic racism. Caldwell's public defender, overwhelmed and under-resourced, could only offer weak objections. Your Honor, my client has no prior criminal convictions. This was an isolated incident during a stressful day. Judge Rodriguez's expression remained neutral, but everyone in the courtroom could feel her controlled anger. She'd reviewed Caldwell's complete file and had seen the pattern of behavior that law enforcement had somehow missed for decades. Mr. Carter, your client's lack of criminal convictions doesn't negate 20 years of civil rights violations. Please call your first witness. Caldwell took the stand in his own defense, a decision his attorney had strongly advised against. But Caldwell's arrogance remained intact despite everything that had happened to him. Your Honor, I was the victim that day. Mrs. Coleman destroyed valuable legal documents, then became hostile when I requested reasonable compensation. I may have reacted more strongly than necessary, but I was provoked. Rodriguez cross-examined with surgical precision. Mr. Caldwell, you testified that Mrs. Coleman became hostile. Can you explain to the court what you mean by hostile? She became argumentative, refused to take responsibility for her actions. Did she raise her voice at you? Well, no. But did she threaten you in any way? Not exactly. But her attitude was... Mr. Caldwell, yes or no? Did Beatrice Coleman do anything aggressive toward you before you struck her? Caldwell's pause lasted too long. She was being disrespectful. Disrespectful how? By existing in a restaurant you considered above her station? The objection came too late. The damage was done. Rodriguez continued. Mr. Caldwell, you used the phrase, "you people," multiple times during this incident. What did you mean by "you people"? I meant people who don't take responsibility for their actions. Is that why you called Mrs. Coleman a ghetto rat and welfare queen? Because she wouldn't take responsibility. Caldwell's composure cracked completely. I was angry. She cost me thousands of dollars in ruined documents. Documents that were sitting unprotected on a restaurant table that you had spilled coffee on before Mrs. Coleman even approached. The timeline didn't work in Caldwell's favor. Security cameras had captured him knocking over his own coffee cup in anger before Beatrice had even stood up. When Beatrice took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. Rodriguez guided her through the events gently, respectfully, allowing her dignity to shine through every answer. Mrs. Coleman, can you describe what happened when you accidentally bumped Mr. Caldwell's table? I immediately apologized and offered to help clean up the spill. I also offered to pay for any damages to his papers. How did Mr. Caldwell respond? He became very angry and started using language that was inappropriate. Can you be more specific about the language he used? Beatrice's voice remained steady. He called me ghetto trash and said people like me didn't belong in decent establishments. How did that make you feel?" For the first time, Beatrice's composure wavered slightly. "It reminded me of a time when such language was more common, when people felt free to express hatred openly. I thought we'd moved beyond that as a society." Rodriguez's final question devastated Caldwell's defense. "Mrs. Coleman, why didn't you simply leave the restaurant when Mr. Caldwell became hostile?" Beatrice straightened in her chair. "Because I had every right to be there. I've been a customer at Gracie's for 15 years. I've lived in this neighborhood for 45 years. I've contributed to this community as a teacher, a volunteer, and a neighbor. I wasn't going to be driven away by someone's hatred." The courtroom erupted in applause. Judge Rodriguez gavelled for order, but her own eyes were damp. Caldwell's character witnesses were devastating in their absence. Former colleagues refused to testify. Country club members suddenly couldn't remember his contributions. Even his own family maintained conspicuous silence. In contrast, Beatrice's supporters filled the witness list. Former students who'd become doctors and lawyers, neighbors whose children she'd tutored, community leaders who'd benefited from her decades of service. Sofia Martinez testified about Beatrice's role in saving the diner during economic hardship. Esther Hayes described their friendship and Beatrice's gentle character. Dr. Patricia Williams, now a federal judge, spoke about the scholarship recommendation Beatrice had written 20 years earlier. The pattern became clear. Beatrice Coleman had spent her life lifting others up, while Edward Caldwell had spent his career tearing others down. Judge Rodriguez retired for deliberation after closing arguments. The wait lasted less than 30 minutes. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, this court finds the defendant guilty on all charges. Mr. Caldwell, your actions represent not just a single moment of violence, but a pattern of behavior that has no place in our society. Caldwell's face went white as the judge continued. You are sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised probation. You will also complete 500 hours of community service at minority-serving organizations, attend mandatory sensitivity training, and pay full restitution to Mrs. Coleman for medical expenses and emotional distress. But Judge Rodriguez wasn't finished. Additionally, this court is recommending that the State Bar Association review your license to practice law. Your actions demonstrate a fundamental lack of character incompatible with the legal profession. Caldwell's legs nearly gave out. His career was over, his reputation was destroyed, his freedom was forfeit. As the bailiff approached with handcuffs, Caldwell's eyes found Marcus Coleman one final time. Marcus didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't acknowledge Caldwell's existence. He simply stood and walked toward his mother, the man who'd orchestrated Caldwell's complete destruction without lifting a finger himself. Beatrice hugged her son gently as they left the courtroom together. Thank you for handling this properly, Marcus. You taught me well, Ma. Justice matters more than revenge. Outside the courthouse, District Attorney Brooks held a press conference announcing new protocols for hate crime prosecution. Police Commissioner O'Malley unveiled enhanced training programs for officers responding to bias incidents. Judge Rodriguez's sentencing had created precedent that would protect future victims. The case had accomplished exactly what Marcus Coleman intended. Caldwell's destruction through legitimate channels while strengthening the system that protected people like his mother. Edward Caldwell was led away in handcuffs. His transformation from predator to prey, complete. The man who'd believed his position made him untouchable had learned that some people command protection through love rather than fear. And Beatrice Coleman returned to her weekly lunch at Gracie's Diner, where she was treated like the queen she'd always been, while her son ensured that no one would ever make Caldwell's mistake again. 6 months later, Beatrice Coleman walked into Gracie's Diner for her weekly lunch with Esther. The same booth waited, the same warm greetings from Sophia and regular customers. But everything had fundamentally changed since Edward Caldwell's sentencing. The city had taken notice of Beatrice's grace under pressure. Mayor Patricia Johnson presented her with the key to the city at a ceremony attended by hundreds. The citation read, "For demonstrating that dignity and courage triumph over prejudice." Beatrice used her platform wisely, partnering with the DA's office to establish the Beatrice Coleman Center for Bias Crime Victims. Federal grants funded the program, while volunteer lawyers, many former students who remembered her kindness, donated thousands of service hours. "It's not about me," Beatrice told reporters. "It's about ensuring no one faces what I faced alone." The Caldwell case became required reading in law schools nationwide. Police departments updated bias crime protocols. The State Bar Association implemented new character requirements for attorney licensing. Meanwhile, Caldwell discovered justice from the receiving end. At the East Side Community Center, he reported for court-mandated community service every Saturday. His supervisor, Mrs. Angela Rodriguez, was a 78-year-old retired teacher who took no nonsense. "You'll be serving meals to seniors who look exactly like the woman you assaulted," she told him that first morning. "Learn their names, stories, and dignity." The work was humbling. Elderly black women served neighbors, organized clothing drives, tutored grandchildren with the same patience Beatrice had shown countless students. Slowly, Caldwell began understanding what he'd tried to destroy. Pillars of community who'd survived decades of prejudice with humanity intact. Marcus Coleman watched these developments with quiet satisfaction. His mother's dignity had accomplished what violence never could. Genuine change, systemic reform, justice that prevented future victims rather than simply punishing past crimes. "Ma," he said during Sunday dinner, "you changed more lives through 15 minutes of grace than I've changed through 15 years of intimidation." Beatrice smiled, patting his hand. "Violence wins battles, Marcus, but only love wins wars." At Gracie's diner, Sophia had framed the newspaper clipping from Beatrice's award ceremony. It hung beside pictures of neighborhood kids who'd achieved success, families celebrating milestones, community members who'd found refuge in this sanctuary of acceptance. A young law student approached Beatrice's table. "Mrs. Coleman, I'm Sarah Carter, studying civil rights law. You inspired me to fight hatred with dignity." Beatrice gestured for Sarah to sit. "Tell me about your family, dear." As Sarah shared her story, immigrant parents, financial struggles, dreams of protecting others, Beatrice saw herself reflected in another young person determined to make the world more just. This was the real victory, not Caldwell's imprisonment, but the inspiration Beatrice's courage provided to the next generation who refused to accept injustice as inevitable. The Caldwell case had created lasting change. Systems reformed, precedents established, hope renewed. Beatrice continued doing what she'd always done, believing in people's capacity for growth, fighting injustice with grace, proving that the most revolutionary act is refusing to let hatred make you hateful. Have you ever stood up for someone who couldn't stand up for themselves? Have you ever discovered that quiet people hold unexpected power? Share your story in the comments. Like, if you believe dignity defeats hatred. Subscribe for more stories where justice emerges from unlikely sources, where ordinary people accomplish extraordinary things by choosing hope over hate, because you never know who might be watching when you choose kindness, whose life might change forever because you did what's right instead of what's easy. The story you heard today wasn't cleaned up. It was told exactly as it happened. At Black Voices Uncut, we believe that's the only way truth can live. If you felt something, hit like, comment, and your reaction, and subscribe. Every week, we bring you voices that refuse to be silenced.